Hey everybody, Derek here to bring another video for The Walking Dead, Season 7. And what I want to do with this video is look at Ezekiel and the Kingdom, and look at whether I think the Kingdom will join the war against the Saviors in Season 7, how Ezekiel will feel about this, and if they join, what will be their motivation for doing so. If you are not caught up with The Walking Dead and you do not want to be spoiled in any way, then I suggest you exit the video now and come back later, because otherwise you will be spoiled. Okay, so in Season 7, Episode 2, called The Well, we were introduced to another community in the Walking Dead world called the Kingdom. And of course, the Kingdom is led by a man named King Ezekiel. And even though we only saw one episode that dealt with the Kingdom and dealt with that story, we learned quite a bit about what was going on in that community and their interactions with the Saviors. As we saw, the Kingdom was a very, very well-developed community. We saw that people were living somewhat peaceful lives, really not experiencing a lot of the horrors of the Walking Dead world. And in many ways, we saw King Ezekiel was the reason for that. He had set up this facade, if you will, of a peaceful, kingdom that he rules and that everybody can get behind and make a better place. But there were a lot of secrets that Ezekiel was keeping from the community, and that being the deal with the Saviors. What we found out was that at some point in the story, before we were introduced, the Kingdom had come in contact with the Saviors, and we can only assume that one of their members was killed, exactly like how the Saviors introduces themselves to anybody else. And they set up a trade agreement that if the Kingdom is able to give them supplies, then the Saviors won't attack and hurt anybody. And we saw that this deal was made separate from everybody else at the Kingdom, that only a few individuals in the Kingdom, only some of Ezekiel's most trusted men and women, actually do know about this arrangement. There are many individuals that do not know about it. And the reason that Ezekiel did this was because he wanted to protect everybody. He believed, and of course many people know this, if the Saviors... Well, if the rest of the community would have found out about the Saviors, then they were going to want to fight. And Ezekiel does not want to fight. We've seen that Ezekiel really does not want to fight the Saviors. He doesn't want to put his people at risk. He does not want to get them killed. We see that Ezekiel, as a leader, really does care about people. He does want to help them. He does want to keep them safe. And he's willing to give over the supplies in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. And the interesting thing about the Kingdom and the Saviors is that you kind of notice that the relationship between the two is different from the other communities. When the Saviors deal with the Hilltop, they know that the Hilltop is a very weak community. They know that there are not a lot of fighters there. So the Kingdom, the Saviors in a sense, can really bully the Hilltop and do what they want with them, and they know nothing's going to happen. With Alexandria, we see that Negan is not letting up on them at all, that he knows how much of a threat they are, that he needs to beat them down so much that they don't have the will to fight back. But with the Kingdom, I think that you see a mutual respect from both Ezekiel, the people that know about the Saviors, as well as the Saviors themselves. Because I think the Saviors realize that if the Kingdom knew that they could fight, they would. And if that happened, that would be very devastating for the Saviors. And at the same time, the Kingdom knows the same thing. And that's why they were meeting in that parking lot, away from the Kingdom walls. So that way they don't instigate anything. And you saw that relationship was going on. And we kind of saw just how different it was in Season 7. Obviously, that leads to the big question. Will they join the war? I think yes. I mean, obviously, I don't think that the war can be fought without the Kingdom. I think that both the Hilltop leaders and Alexandria's leaders, Rick, Jesus, Maggie, Daryl, all of them are going to realize they're outmanned. They don't have the amount of fighters necessary just between the hilltop and Alexandria to fight the saviors. They'd all die. So they need the kingdom. So one way or the other, I think the kingdom will join. But how easily will they be able to convince the kingdom to join? That, I think, might be a little trickier than what we see in the comics. The comics really rushes this storyline in many ways, because what ends up happening in the comic books, I'll give you a little background, is that Rick initially comes up with the idea to fight. In a sense, Rick really was never totally beaten down like he has been shown in the TV show. Yes, temporarily, Rick was absolutely struggling with Glenn's death. He definitely was questioning his abilities as a leader, questioning whether he could really figure out what to do with Negan and the Saviors. But very, very quickly afterwards, Rick had the will to fight, and he was planning it for a long, long time, even before Negan came into the community and took supplies the first time. So the comic books really don't show, like, Rick being very defeated. It doesn't make all hope lost, because Negan doesn't take the weapons away from them, and Negan doesn't continuously beat them down. Well, Jesus and Rick basically talk about their plans to fight the Saviors, because the Hilltop also gets behind the fight, but not as cleanly as they portray it in the TV show either, but that's a different video that I'll talk about. So what ends up happening is, kind of like how the sneak peek showed in the Walking Dead Season 7, that sneak peek we saw, Jesus does introduce Rick to Ezekiel and the kingdom. And this is the first time that we ever see Ezekiel, and immediately he says, "Oh, yes, I will absolutely fight, because I have been waiting for the moment for us to finally have an opportunity to fight. I hate Negan. I hate the way that he's treated me and my people." You know, in a sense, it's a personal slight against Ezekiel that Negan does what he does. And because they finally have Alexandria and Rick's group, this makes Ezekiel want to fight. So Ezekiel really gives in very easily, and actually agrees to fight right off the bat. There really wasn't that much of a debate. You know, Ezekiel was absolutely willing to fight, had no issues, and he joins the war. I don't think it's going to be as simple in the TV show. I think the way that they have set it up, I think that Ezekiel is absolutely going to be resistant to wanting to fight. He's going to hesitate. I don't think that he's going to want to do it. You know, even though you have great fighters in Rick's group, even though you have some fighters in the Hilltop, and the kingdom, obviously, what they really need from them, number one, is weapons, because the kingdom does have weapons. Maybe not as many as the Saviors, but it's a start for Rick's group to be able to get some guns, some other weapons that they can use to then fight against the Saviors. The other thing is the manpower. We have seen a lot of people in the kingdom. I don't know how many exactly there are, but when you combine the fighters in Alexandria, the people who would be able to fight, as well as people from the Hilltop and the kingdom, you have a fair force that can at least do something against the Saviors. So obviously they are needed, but I think that Ezekiel is going to hesitate. I don't think that he's going to want to fight, because again, we've seen that Ezekiel would rather keep the peace. We would see that he would rather lie to everybody, keep this facade going, just to focus on something better, to make the world a better place, that he doesn't want to get into the ugliness of war, of the killing, things like that, breaking down the community. I don't think he wants that to happen. So I think that he's going to turn Rick down, honestly, or he's going to really need a good reason for why he should do this. So I think that, honestly, like we saw in Season 7, the mid-season finale, how Richard asked Carol and Morgan to help him convince Ezekiel, I think that they'll also have a role in that. I think we will see maybe that people might go behind Ezekiel's back to try to get the movement to force the fight. So I think that you might see that happening, that you might see people in Alexandria kind of talking to the kingdom. You might also see Richard going behind Ezekiel's back and talking with people about this and maybe getting the community to rally behind this fight. And Ezekiel will have no choice at that point. Either he joins or he might be ousted from his leadership, and maybe rather than look weak in front of everybody, he would rather fight. I could see that happening. But the other possibility that I think the reason that might motivate the kingdom to to join the fight, I think might be because something might happen. As we've seen with the way that the saviors have been interacting with Alexandria and the hilltop, we've seen that really the saviors maybe in a sense feel threatened by what's going on. Because let's think about what's happened with the saviors, the hilltop, and Alexandria. You had Alexandria and the hilltop go behind the saviors' backs in a sense and plan this invasion of that outpost. So you saw the hilltop doing something like that. The saviors know they did it. And then, of course, after getting attacked, I think that you see that the saviors really start to realize that there are threats out there in the world. And I think that really the events over the last 8 episodes have possibly even convinced the saviors that they are not as powerful as maybe they think, that maybe they are vulnerable. And I think that the events of the mid-season finale may have repercussions against the kingdom. Because let's think about it. We know that Rosita tried to shoot Negan. We saw that Negan almost died in the mid-season finale because he got shot at. And I think that this event may really cause Negan to become more harsh on the other communities. That maybe he might go to his people and say, hey, listen, we can't take a chance with these communities. We've already seen what Rick's group is willing to do. We can't let these people get away with things anymore. And maybe Gavin and Jared, the saviors that were that basically went to the kingdom and would collect the supplies, maybe he might tell them, hey, how are things going with the kingdom? Is everything fine? And maybe they might say something like, no, it's not. We just had a little fight, the last time we went to go pick things up. And Negan might tell them, well, you need to nip that in the bud. You need to get over there and you need to make sure that you don't have any more problems. And I think there's a very good chance that Richard might get killed in the mid-season premiere or sometime after that. That I think what might end up happening is that the saviors, they're either going to do one of two things. They're either going to kill somebody from the kingdom because of what happened between Richard and Jared in season 7, episode 2, that maybe to come down on them for doing that, they have to be punished, or they're going to break the agreement, that they are not going to meet in the parking lot, that they're actually going to show up at the kingdom walls, come in, do things that's going to upset Ezekiel. He's going to realize the deal is off. And they may do something while they're there as well that might force Ezekiel to realize, you know what? Richard was right. This can't work. I think that Ezekiel is the kind of person that if you honor a deal, if the arrangement is going well, he has no problem with doing that. But the moment that his people are put in danger, then I think that Ezekiel will act. So personally, I think that you're going to see some event like I've described happen in either the mid-season premiere or maybe even episode 10. I think that there's a possibility that somebody in the kingdom might die as a result of it. Again, they might kill somebody just for what happened in season 7, episode 2. Also, maybe Negan's reaction from things that happened in the mid-season finale. And as a result of that, I think that's going to motivate the kingdom to get behind Rick's group, to really go against the saviors, fight, and hope for a better future. So that's what I think is going to happen. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think that the events will go down the way I've described? Is there something else I haven't considered? Don't be afraid to let me know. Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. Have a very wonderful evening, and thank you all very much for watching.